As you guys know, I've been thrilled, privileged to be the host of the WNBA on Ion on Friday nights. Join us 7 o'clock Eastern, and my bestie, one of my partners on the desk, joining us now, back on the show. She was my good friend, our good friend before Ion called, and she's just a great friend, even better now. Also on Big Ten Network, Peacock. She's ESPN, super talented, former Northwestern player, Meghan McKeown. Meghan, good to see you again.
Larry, always good to see you. Normally it's just Fridays, but lucky me, I get you twice this week. So let's do it.
Exactly, exactly. So, hey, listen, let's talk. We're about a weekend or so, into the second half of the season. What stands out for you so far? I've got some thoughts, and I know Mike does too. But I want to kind of see what you think.
Well, first and foremost, I don't know what team is catching New York right now
Yeah.
because they are way too balanced, way too deep at this point to be stopped, it feels like. Sabrina Ionescu is playing some of her best basketball. Brianna Stewart, I think she's the women's basketball equivalent of Kevin Durant in terms of her ability to score in the mid range and just score in general. Um, Jonquel Jones, her ability to knock down threes as a center and also play in the paint. I mean, they just have so many different weapons and experience coming at you that they're elite. Caitlin Clark is finally doing what everyone thought she was going to do in the league. And I love that she has finally gotten more comfortable with her team and started to really embrace being a pro. And you kind of see it not just with her game, but also kind of in press conferences now. She's a little more relaxed and laid back and a little more herself, which, this is a young woman who has been in the brightest spotlight for 2 years now and has had no break whatsoever. And I think having a month off for the Olympics was the best thing that could have possibly happened to her. She looks refreshed. She looks sharp. And I'll tell you what, Indiana looks like a playoff team right now, which is something that's going to be interesting to watch down the stretch.
Yeah, Mike, before you jump in, 5 straight wins as we get into the weekend against teams with winning records. That's one thing they did not have on their resume early, and they've got to figure that part out. Mike, your thoughts?
Well, the question I had is when you're looking at constructing a team, what needs to be done to catch up to the Liberty? I mean, there's
Question.
somebody's got to get a plan together, right? Because they're on a roll. Is there anything that can be done, or is this more of we've got to take a look at this in the long run on how we take this team down?
Unless you can pay off the FIA to cancel the Liberty's flight on their game to you. That's kind of it's
I'm not
tough.
above that if I was in the league.
Hey, you got to do what you got to do, right? You ain't cheating, you ain't trying. But I look at a team like Connecticut, who is going to be your second best team in the East. And they added Marina Mabry right before the Olympic break, which is really interesting and a huge get for them because Connecticut, for as good as they've been defensively, have struggled with consistency on the offensive end. So adding that 3-point shooting ability from Marina Mabry is really interesting. They play against New York this upcoming weekend on Saturday, and I'm curious how they look, kind of this new look Connecticut team versus the Liberty team that's already beaten them 3 times this season. So that's a team I think okay, you add a little more depth in your scoring ability with an already solid defensive team. How does that help you moving forward? But there aren't very many answers. Just like there's not really an answer to stopping Asia Wilson at this point. Sometimes you don't know, and that's why GMs are paid much more money than I am to figure out how to construct a team.
Speaking of Asia Wilson, the one team I want to talk about before we move on to Big Ten women's basketball, as we're talking here to Meghan McKeown. Speaking Las Vegas Aces, back-to-back champs. Last weekend, given they were playing New York, which I think we all agree is the best team in the league right now. How much of a threat are they coming down the pike? They've got some teams in front of them who are playing really well. Three-peating is hard, hasn't happened in the league since 2000. Do you see them making a run and being in the mix at the very end?
Absolutely. They are a team that at the end of the day has balance and experience. And if they can stay healthy, which is the biggest factor, it does not matter what sport you're playing, your health is massive in terms of making deep runs in a tournament style. So I look at what you have in terms of maybe they were a little rusty because half of their starting five, more than half of their starting five was just in Paris, winning an Olympic gold medal and had to come back and deal with some jet lag. That could have, been a factor, even though a lot of teams are dealing with that. But they have two good, when I say balance, it's like not just, they have the MVP of the league right now, Asia Wilson, who's playing well. Like Kelsey Plum can score in every which way. Jackie Young can defend and score in every which way. Chelsea Gray was last year the best point guard in the world. And her ability to facilitate at a high level, like she makes some insane passes. And I don't think it's nearly the amount of credit she deserves for her playmaking ability and her IQ on the floor. So when you have all of that talent, plus the experience of everybody playing together and winning a championship together, that pays off dividends. And it's something that you can't teach at all. You just kind of have to have that. And if you got it, you got it. And that's what's going to help them make a deep run in the playoffs.
When we transition to Big Ten and what's going on in the Big Ten with women's basketball, what do you think the post-Caitlin era in the Big Ten is going to look like, moving her into the professional ranks?
It's a great question. I have never covered the Big Ten in an era when Caitlin Clark wasn't at Iowa. So this is going to be new for me as well. What's great for women's basketball fans and Big Ten women's basketball fans is the next big name star, Juju Watkins, is now in the Big Ten. So you add in like these West Coast teams that have been like traditional powerhouses in women's basketball. USC, you go back to Cheryl Miller, Lisa Leslie. UCLA, you have Kiki Rice, who's one of the best guards in the or in college basketball right now. Ann Myers Drysdale, legendary women's basketball player. Jordan Canada, who's playing right now for Atlanta and is back from injury and doing great things. UCLA, big program. Oregon, we just went to the Final Four a couple of years ago. Sabrina Ionescu was on that team. Kelly Graves is one of the legendary women's basketball coaches. Then you think about Caitlin Clark beating the scoring record. She beat Kelsey Plum's scoring record when she was at Washington, who now comes into the league. So you have these 4 teams that are elite teams. And then you look at just overall the coaching in the Big Ten, you have legendary coaches who almost all have NCAA tournament experience, who almost all at one point or another have won the league, which is crazy that there's been so much of a variety over the last decade of different teams that have won the Big Ten. And then you have, with the transfer portal and NIL money being the way it is, you have some super teams being built. Maryland is scary. What they went out and did in the portal is absolutely insane. UCLA and USC have half of the McDonald's All-American rosters coming in as freshmen to their schools. There's so much talent throughout this league. Ohio State, if you told me at the end of the day, and we're talking 8 months from now, and it's USC, UCLA, Ohio State, and Maryland in the Final Four of the NCAA tournament, that wouldn't shock me.
Mm. That would be incredible for Big Ten fans.
Yeah.
I had one other question. In men's basketball, it seems like the rest of the world is really, really close to the USA right now. And you could make an argument that with Victor Wembanyama with France, that in 2028, maybe the US men aren't the favorite to win the gold.
Yeah.
How far is the rest of the world behind the USA in women's basketball?
That's a great question. And I think a lot of it was on display. People were surprised that the US only beat France by 1 in the gold medal game. But people don't realize how good international women's basketball is. You look at like Australia, for example, some of the best players in the WNBA, Lauren Jackson, have come from Australia. You see what Gabby Williams did for France. And Gabby Williams was crushing it on the Chicago Sky a couple of years ago when she was in Seattle. Like, she's a WNBA player, and these are women that go back to play for their home country because they can make that Olympic team. And it's the greatest honor as an athlete that you could possibly have. So the rest of the world, I think it's going to be really competitive, right? Over the next couple of Olympics, which is great. You want competitive games. But there's still, to me, like no clear-cut country that can still bring more talent to the table than the United States at the end of the day.
I think too, you're going to see as the WNBA expands, Golden State coming up, Toronto,
Mhm.
some other teams that have yet to be determined. We know we're going to get at least a couple more teams here in the near future. You get it, you'll have more roster spots, get a chance to see more of those international players. They'll become more household names. It'll make sense like it does on the men's team because the American audience will know the women Yamas and the Jokic's and et cetera, et cetera. So you're
It's
exactly
exciting. You know, Larry, every single night we have a game on Ion. It's like a new record being broken. And a lot of times it's Caitlin Clark games, of course, because she's such an exciting player, but you're getting a huge audience exposed to 10 players on the floor at all times. And you never know, maybe somebody else sticks out to somebody. As I watched for Caitlin Clark, but I fell in love with Kelsey Mitchell or Kalia Copper when I was there. And now I'm more interested in the Phoenix and I'm keeping track of here and there. So you just never know how that's going to happen. But I'm so happy that women's basketball is finally getting the recognition it deserves. And we're having debates now. Like people on Twitter are fighting about Caitlin Clark not being on Team USA. And it's great that we have these debates because this happens all the time in the men's game. So
yeah.
why not let it happen in the women's game? It's great for the sport. And I can't wait to see how things continue to take off.
Yeah, I knew that the women's game had arrived when there were people mad because the Chicago Sky preseason game was not
I
televised.
know.
Not a regular season.
Yeah.
Preseason. Like,
Yeah.
really? Is this an argument? Which is a beautiful thing. Hey, Megan, always good to talk with you. By the way, shameless plug once again, 7 o'clock Eastern time, Friday nights on Ion. We have a brand new studio. You should have, if you missed it, check it out again this Friday night, every Friday night, rest of the season, and watch Megan work the telestrator like a
Oh my
pro.
gosh.
She had about 20 minutes tutorial, and she and Autumn Johnson were fantastic. I just sat back. I'm like, I'm glad it's them and not me because I don't really know technology. I'm not very good at this. I'm too old. So
So
Not
they're
at
the
all.
modern
Larry, please.
modern day John Madden with the throw in
Yeah,
a few booms
that's
and
right.
a few
yeah,
cracks and stuff like that will be
100%.
great.
Mike, we'll throw in a boom for you this Friday.
I,
There you
I
go.
I record it. I got it on. I don't miss it, so I'll
I
see it.
love that.
Megan, always good to talk with you. Be safe, my friend. I'll see you in the studio this week.
Thanks, guys.
All right, thanks so much. Megan McKeown, once again, she's with the WNBA on Ion Friday nights. Be sure for the rest of the regular season. Also, of course, Big Ten Network, Peacock, ESPN, super talented and a great friend. And glad she spent some time with us here today. We've got more to come. As always, we'll stop, we'll pay a couple of bills, and then more conversation coming up next.